In the high-stakes ecosystem of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, the waitstaff are designed to be invisible ghosts in waistcoats who facilitate the pleasures of the elite. They see everything, hear everything, and say nothing. But silence has a breaking point. When Damian Cross, a real estate mogul worth $3 billion, decided to use a secret language to dismantle the dignity of his waitress, he made a fatal calculation. He assumed the woman pouring his vintage Cabernet was uneducated. He assumed she was powerless. And worst of all, he assumed she didn't speak Arabic. He was wrong on all counts. What happened in the next 60 seconds didn't just silence a room, it toppled a business empire. This is the story of the night the invisible became undeniable. The air inside the Gilded Onyx didn't smell like food. It smelled of old money, heavy perfume, and the crisp, distinct scent of fear. Located on the 44th floor of a building that pierced the midtown Manhattan skyline, the restaurant was the kind of place where the menu had no prices, and the water was imported from glaciers that no longer existed. Sarah Bennett adjusted the cuffs of her starch-white shirt, wincing slightly. The blister on her left heel, a throbbing reminder of a double shift yesterday, was currently screaming for attention, but her face remained a mask of serene, professional detachment. At 28, Sarah had mastered the art of being seen but not noticed. She was a ghost in the machine of luxury. "Table 4 is yours tonight." Bennett, the floor manager, a nervous, sweating man named Arthur Galloway, hissed into her ear. He clutched his clipboard like a shield. "And God help you don't mess it up. It's Damian Cross." Sarah felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Everyone in the service industry in New York knew the name. Damian Cross, the CEO of Apex Horizon Group. He was the golden boy of Manhattan real estate, a man who bought historic buildings just to tear them down and put up glass monoliths with his name on them. He was known for two things: his ruthless business acquisitions and his absolute terrorizing of service staff. "Understood," Sarah said, her voice steady. "He has guests," Galloway continued, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "International, very high profile, investors from the Gulf. Alcohol is permitted, but be discreet. If the water glass drops below half full, you fill it. If he snaps his fingers, you are there before the sound finishes. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact for longer than a second." "I know the drill, Arthur," Sarah said, picking up the silver water pitcher. The condensation was cold against her palm. "I hope so," Galloway muttered, turning away to berate a busboy. "Because he got a waiter fired at Le Bernardin last week, just for breathing too loudly." Sarah walked out onto the floor, her posture perfect. The dining room was a sea of velvet and crystal. At table 4, the best seat in the house overlooking Central Park, sat 3 men. Damian Cross was easy to spot. He was handsome in a predatory way, sharp jawline hair slicked back with expensive product, wearing a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than Sarah's entire student loan debt. He sat with his legs sprawled, occupying as much space as possible. Opposite him were 2 men. One was older, distinguished with a neatly trimmed grey beard and a thobe traditional Arab dress, though he wore a Western suit jacket over it, suggesting a casual business meeting. This was clearly the target investor. The third man was younger, likely an assistant or translator, typing furiously on a tablet. As Sarah approached, she slipped into her role. She wasn't Sarah Bennett, the former linguistics PhD candidate, who had to drop out when her father's medical bills decimated her savings. She was just the waitress. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "Welcome to the Gilded Onyx. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you this evening." Damian Cross didn't look up. He was staring at his phone, scrolling through what looked like stock futures. He waved a hand dismissively in the air, a gesture one might use to swat away a fly. Sparkling water, ice on the side, not inside the glass on the side. If it's melted, take it back. Cross barked, still looking at his screen. And bring the wine list, the real one, not the one you give the tourists. Certainly, sir, Sarah said. She turned to the guests. And for you, gentlemen. The older man looked up, offering a polite, weary smile. Still water is fine, thank you. Immediately, she said. As she turned to leave, she heard Cross let out a loud, mocking sigh. Unbelievable, he muttered to the table loud enough for her to hear. They hire these local girls, probably straight out of community college, and they act like they're serving royalty. It takes forever to get a drink in this city. Sarah froze for a microsecond, then kept walking. It was the standard power play. Men like Cross needed to belittle the staff to show their dominance to their guests. It was a pathetic, ancient ritual. She returned efficiently with the water and the heavy leather-bound wine reserve list. She placed the ice bucket to Cross's right and poured the water with surgical precision. We have some exceptional additions to the cellar this week, Mr. Cross, she said, presenting the book. The 1982 Chateau Margaux is particularly showing well. Cross snatched the book from her hands without a thank you. He scanned the pages, his lip curling. Standard, he muttered. Then he looked at the older guest. Mr. Al-Hamad, I insist we celebrate. The deal is practically done. Let's get the 96 Dom Perignon. It's the only thing drinkable in this dump. Mr. Al-Hamad nodded politely. As you wish, Mr. Cross. But we must discuss the zoning permits in Jeddah before we sign. It's handled, Cross said, waving his hand again. American efficiency, my friend. Unlike what you're used to, we actually get things done on time here. The insult to the guest's culture was subtle, but sharp. Sarah saw Mr. Al-Hamad's eyes tighten slightly. Cross was overplaying his hand. He was arrogant, assuming that because he had the money, he owned the room. Sarah took the wine order and retreated. Back at the service station, her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from a simmering, cold anger. She had grown up in households where hospitality was sacred. Her father had been a diplomat stationed in Riyadh and Beirut for 15 years. She had spent her childhood in the Middle East, absorbing the culture, the warmth and the language like a sponge before coming back to the States for college. To see someone treat a guest and a server with such casual disdain was infuriating. He's a nightmare, isn't he? Sarah looked up. It was Julian the sommelier. He's a charmer, Sarah deadpanned. Careful, Julian whispered, handing her the chilled bottle of Dom Perignon. I heard him talking about the merger. He's trying to acquire a massive waterfront property in Dubai. If he closes this, he doubles his net worth. He's on a high. That makes him dangerous. Sarah took the bottle, wrapping it in a white linen napkin. I'll be careful. I just need to get through the next 2 hours. She didn't know that the next 2 hours would change the trajectory of her entire life. The dinner service dragged on like a slow torture. Every time Sarah approached the table, Cross found a new flaw. The bread was too hard, the butter was too cold, the music was too loud. Can you do anything right? Cross snapped when Sarah reached across to clear a salad plate. You're hovering. It's distracting. Go stand over there until I call you. He pointed to a spot near the kitchen door like he was disciplining a dog. Sarah's jaw clenched, but she nodded. Apologies, sir. She moved to the designated spot, standing rigid, her eyes fixed on the table. From this distance, she watched the dynamic shift. Cross was drinking heavily. The bottle of Dom Perignon was gone, and they were on to a heavy Napa Cabernet. Mr. Al-Hamad was sipping his water, looking increasingly uncomfortable. The younger man, the assistant, looked terrified. Cross was leaning in, his voice booming. "The problem with your region, Al-Hamad, is that you're too sentimental. You hold on to old buildings, old traditions. In New York, if something is old, we blow it up. That's progress. That's what I'm bringing to your city." Mr. Al-Hamad spoke softly, his English heavily accented but precise. "Heritage is important to us, Mr. Cross. The location we are discussing, it has history. History doesn't pay the rent." Cross laughed, slamming his hand on the table. The cutlery rattled. Other diners turned to look, but Cross didn't care. He signaled for Sarah. She walked over immediately. "More wine," he demanded, thrusting his glass at her. "I'm afraid the bottle is finished, sir. Would you like to order another?" Cross looked at her with glazed, bloodshot eyes. He looked at the empty bottle, then at Sarah, then at Mr. Al-Hamad. A wicked idea seemed to form in his mind. He wanted to bond with his investor, and he decided the best way to do it was through shared superiority. He leaned toward Mr. Al-Hamad, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. But he didn't speak in English. He switched to Arabic. Cross had clearly taken lessons. It was choppy-accented and clumsy, but it was understandable. He obviously thought this was his party trick, a way to show he was worldly while being nasty. He spoke in Gulf Arabic, looking directly at Sarah while he spoke to Al-Hamad. "Look at this creature," Cross said in Arabic, grinning like a shark. "She stands there like a statue. Zero intelligence. In my country, these people are trash. I bet she lives in a box." Sarah stood perfectly still. The bottle in her hand didn't waver. Her heart, however, hammered against her ribs. He was speaking Arabic. He assumed he was certain that the white waitress with the blonde ponytail and the generic uniform couldn't understand a syllable. Mr. Al-Hamad looked mortified. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to Sarah, then down to his plate. He didn't respond. Cross, thinking the silence was agreement, pushed further. He was enjoying this. It was a power trip. He could insult her to her face, and she would have to stand there and smile, completely ignorant of his abuse. "And look at her face," Cross continued in Arabic, his words slurring slightly. "So plain. Like a goat. If she was in your city, she wouldn't even be allowed to clean the floors of your office. But here I have to tip her. I should throw a coin on the floor and make her crawl for it." The younger assistant gasped quietly. Mr. Al-Hamad's face went stony cold. "Sir," the assistant whispered in Arabic, "this is inappropriate." "Quiet," Cross snapped back in Arabic. "She understands nothing. Look at her. The lights are on, but nobody is home. She is a peasant." Cross turned his face back to Sarah, switching instantly to English with a fake, charming smile. "I said bring another bottle. And be quick about it, sweetheart. My friends and I are thirsty." Sarah looked at him. For a moment, the restaurant noises faded away. The clinking of silverware, the low hum of jazz, the chatter, it all vanished. All she could hear was the echo of his words. Creature, trash, goat, crawl. She thought about her father. She thought about the years she spent in the dusty libraries of Beirut, studying the intricate poetry of the Arabic language. She thought about the dignity of the Bedouin elders who had taught her that a guest is a gift from God, but a host must be worthy of that gift. She looked at Damian Cross, a man with billions of dollars and zero honor. She had a choice. She could walk away, get the wine, take the abuse, and collect the tip that would pay her rent. That was the safe choice. That was what the waitress would do. But Sarah Bennett was done with being safe. She tightened her grip on the empty bottle. She didn't move toward the wine cellar. Instead, she took a half step closer to the table. Mr. Galloway, the manager, was watching from across the room, sensing tension. He started to walk over, panic in his eyes. It was too late. Sarah looked Damien Cross directly in the eyes. She let the silence stretch for 3 uncomfortable seconds. The smile fell from Cross's face. He looked confused. "What are you doing? I gave you an order." Sarah took a deep breath. When she opened her mouth, the sound that came out was not the flat, service industry English she had used all night. It was fluent, impeccable high-register Arabic. The silence that followed Sarah's transition into Arabic was absolute. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on table 4. The ambient noise of the gilded onyx, the clinking of silverware, the low murmur of conversation seemed to fall away, leaving only the sound of Sarah's voice resonating in the sudden vacuum. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She spoke with the calm, devastating clarity of a news anchor delivering a tragedy. "Mr. Cross." Sarah said her Gulf Arabic dialect flawless, tinged with the distinct poetic formality she had learned from the Bedouin elders in the desert outside Riyadh. "Your pronunciation of the Gain is a little throat-heavy, and your grammar is that of a first-year student. But your intent is perfectly clear." Damien Cross dropped his fork. It hit the porcelain plate with a violence that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had coated him like armor just seconds ago evaporated, leaving him looking naked and foolish. Sarah didn't stop. She turned her eyes to Mr. Al-Hamad, lowering her head in a gesture of profound, culturally appropriate respect, a gesture that Cross wouldn't even recognize, let alone understand. "Forgive me, Sayyidi, sir," she continued, her voice softening, but losing none of its steel. "It brings me great shame that a guest of your stature must witness such behavior. There is an old proverb from the poetry of Al-Mutanabbi: if you see the lion's teeth, do not assume the lion is smiling. You're sitting with a man who smiles, but his teeth are rotten with disrespect. He calls me a goat and trash because he thinks dignity is something you can buy with money. But we know better." Mr. Al-Hamad stared at her. His eyes, previously guarded and weary, were now wide with shock and something else. Recognition. Respect. He slowly placed his napkin on the table, his movements deliberate. "You speak with the tongue of the learned," Al-Hamad replied in Arabic, his voice booming in the quiet space. He ignored Cross completely. "Where are you from, child?" "I am nobody, sir," Sarah replied, switching back to English for the benefit of the room, ensuring Cross understood every word of his own public execution. "Just the creature who cleans the table, just the peasant who should crawl for coins." She turned her gaze back to Cross. The billionaire's face had transitioned from shock to a deep, mottling shade of crimson. The veins in his neck were bulging against his collar. He wasn't used to being defied. He certainly wasn't used to being humiliated in a language he tried to weaponize. "You—" Cross choked out, standing up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You little—" "I wouldn't finish that sentence, Damien," Sarah said, using his first name. It was a firing offense, and she knew it. She didn't care. "You assumed I was stupid because I serve you food. You assumed I was deaf because I was paid to be silent. But I heard every word. You insulted my appearance, my intelligence, and my worth as a human being. And you did it while trying to swindle this man." She gestured to Al-Hamad. "He called your traditions backward." "Sir," Sarah said to the investor, locking eyes with him. "He told his assistant earlier that he plans to tear down the historic district you're trying to protect. He called it bulldozing the junk to make room for glass cages. He doesn't respect your history. He sees your heritage as an obstacle to his bonus." This was the kill shot, the business deal. The younger assistant, Tariq, looked at his boss, Mr. Al-Hamad, and nodded slowly, confirming Sarah's translation. Mr. Al-Hamad stood up. He was a man of average height, but in that moment he seemed to tower over the sprawling, red-faced American billionaire. He buttoned his suit jacket with dignified slowness. "Mr. Cross?" Al-Hamad said, his English crisp and cold as ice. "It seems there has been a miscalculation. I was told you were a visionary. I see now you are merely a bully." "Wait." Cross stammered, his hands shaking as he reached out. "Al-Hamad, please. She's lying. She's a disgruntled employee. She's crazy. Look at her. She has shown more honor in 2 minutes than you have shown in 2 days," Al-Hamad said. "The deal is dead. Do not contact my office again." Al-Hamad turned to Sarah. He paused, reaching into his pocket. He didn't pull out money. He pulled out a business card embossed with gold leaf. "If you ever tire of serving men like him," Al-Hamad said softly, "call this number. My foundation values people who speak the truth." He placed the card on the table, not in her hand, respecting her space. Then he and his assistant turned and walked out of the restaurant. The silence they left behind was deafening. Every eye in the restaurant was on table 4. Damian Cross stood amidst the wreckage of his billion-dollar deal. He looked at the empty chairs. Then he looked at Sarah. The shock in his eyes was replaced by a pure, unadulterated rage. It was the look of a man who wanted to destroy something. "Galloway!" Cross roared. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. "Get out here now!" Arthur Galloway, the manager, materialized from the shadows near the kitchen, looking like he was walking to his own execution. He was pale, sweating profusely, his hands wringing together. "Mr. Cross, sir, I am so sorry You hired this bitch," Cross screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Sarah. Spittle flew from his mouth. "She just cost me $1 billion. She humiliated me. Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what I can do to this place? Sarah," Galloway squeaked, turning on her with panic in his eyes. "What did you do? My God, what did you do?" "I did my job, Arthur," Sarah said, calmly, though her legs were beginning to tremble. The adrenaline dump was hitting her hard. "I served the customer, and I refused to be abused." "You're fired!" Galloway screamed, his voice cracking. Get out now! Don't even clock out, just go!" "Fired isn't enough," Cross hissed, stepping closer to Sarah, invading her personal space. He loomed over her, smelling of expensive wine and malice. "I'm going to ruin you. You hear me? I'm going to make sure you never work in this city again. I'll blacklist you from every restaurant, every hotel, every fast food joint in New York. I will sue you for slander until you're living in a cardboard box. You think you're smart? You're nothing." Sarah looked up at him. She wanted to cry. She wanted to run. But she held her ground. "You can take my job, Damien," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you can't take my dignity. You gave that away the moment you opened your mouth." She unpinned her name tag, Sarah, and dropped it into the water glass she had just refilled. It sank to the bottom, clinking against the ice. "I quit," she said. She turned on her heel and walked away. She walked past the gaping diners, past the terrified hostesses, past the kitchen staff, peeking through the porthole windows. She didn't run. She walked with her head high, counting her steps to keep from collapsing. 1, 2, 3, 4. She pushed through the heavy double doors of the restaurant and into the service corridor. The heavy muffled sound of the dining room cut off instantly, replaced by the hum of the ventilation and the buzzing of fluorescent lights. Only then, alone in the hallway, did she let out a breath. She slumped against the cold concrete wall, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't unclasp her hands. She had won the battle. But as the reality of Cross's threat sank in, she realized the war had just begun. The locker room in the basement of the skyscraper was a dismal contrast to the gold and velvet world 44 floors above. It smelled of bleach and stale sweat. Sarah sat on the wooden bench, her hands gripping the edge until her knuckles turned white. She had changed out of her uniform, the white shirt, the black waistcoat, the tie, and back into her street clothes, a worn denim jacket and black jeans. The uniform lay in a heap in the corner of her locker. She left it there. She didn't want to touch it ever again. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Then again. Then a third time. She pulled it out. It was a text from Jenna, one of the other waitresses who had been on the floor. Jenna OMG Sarah. Are you okay? Cross is tearing the place apart. He's screaming at Arthur. He's on the phone with his lawyers. You need to get out of the building. Now. Sarah's stomach churned. She knew men like Damien Cross. To them, the law wasn't a system of justice. It was a weapon they could afford to wield. He wouldn't just let this go. His ego was too bruised. He needed a scalp. She grabbed her bag and hurried toward the service elevator. She didn't want to run into Cross or Galloway. She just wanted to get home to her tiny apartment in Queens, lock the door, and sleep for a week. As the elevator doors opened onto the ground floor, loading dock staff weren't allowed to use the main lobby. The cold night air hit her. It was raining a miserable, drizzling New York mist. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, pulling her collar up. Ms. Bennett. The voice came from the shadows near the loading bay entrance. Sarah jumped, clutching her bag to her chest. A man stepped forward. It wasn't Cross. It wasn't Galloway. It was a man in a sharp black suit, wearing an earpiece. He held a large black umbrella. Beside him stood a black SUV with tinted windows. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, backing away. "If you're with Cross, tell him to go to hell." The man raised a hand, peacefully. "I am not with Mr. Cross. My name is Lucas. I work for Mr. Al-Hamad." Sarah stopped. The rain misted against her face. "Mr. Al-Hamad left." "He did," Lucas said, "but he asked me to wait for you. He was concerned for your safety." The rear window of the SUV rolled down about 3 inches. Sarah couldn't see a face, just the darkness of the interior. "Ms. Bennett," Al-Hamad's voice floated out from the car. It was calm and fatherly. "Please come closer. I do not wish to shout over the rain." Sarah hesitated. In New York, getting into a stranger's car was rule number 1 of what not to do. But something about the older man's demeanor earlier, the way he had looked at her with genuine respect, made her step forward. She stood by the window. "I wanted to apologize again," Al-Hamad said. "I did not know the nature of the man I was doing business with. You saved me a great deal of trouble and money. A partnership with a man without honor is a partnership doomed to fail. I couldn't listen to it anymore," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "I lost my job, though." "You lost a job that was beneath you," Al-Hamad corrected. "But you are in danger. Cross is a petty man. I have done business in this city for 40 years. I know his type. He will try to make an example of you. He will try to ensure you cannot work in hospitality." "He already said he would," Sarah admitted, looking down at her wet boots. "He will try," Al-Hamad repeated. "But he forgets that influence works 2 ways. I have taken the liberty of contacting a friend of mine. He owns the St. Regis Group. If you wish to continue in this line of work, you have a position there starting tomorrow. It is a better environment. Safer." Sarah looked up, stunned. The St. Regis was the pinnacle. It was leagues above the gilded onyx. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Al-Hamad said. "But be careful, Sarah. Cross is vindictive. He will not stop at firing you. Watch your back." The window rolled up. The bodyguard nodded to her, got into the front seat, and the SUV pulled away, disappearing into the rainy Manhattan traffic. Sarah stood there for a moment, clutching the strap of her bag. A lifeline. She had a lifeline. But Al-Hamad was right. Cross wasn't done. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a pounding headache and a notification on her phone that made her blood run cold. It wasn't a job offer from the St. Regis. It was an email from a law firm, Sterling, Cooper and Cross. Subject cease and desist / notice of litigation. Ms. Bennett. You are hereby notified that Apex Horizon Group is filing a civil suit against you for defamation of character, breach of non-disclosure agreement, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We are seeking damages in the amount of $5 million for the loss of the Al-Hamad acquisition. Furthermore, we have contacted the National Restaurant Association regarding your conduct. Sarah dropped the phone on her bed. $5 million. It was a number so large it didn't even feel real. It was a scare tactic, obviously, but the threat of the blacklist was real. She went to her laptop and opened the industry job board she used. She tried to log into her profile to update her resume. Account suspended. Reason flagged for unprofessional conduct by verified employer. He had moved fast. Overnight, Damian Cross had used his connections to flag her digital profile. In the modern hospitality world where everything was connected by apps and agencies, he was systematically deleting her ability to earn a living. Sarah sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. Panic began to rise in her chest, a cold tide. She had rent due in 4 days. She had student loans. She had $400 in her bank account. She picked up her phone to call the number Al-Hamad had given her, but she hesitated. If she went to the St. Regis now with a lawsuit hanging over her head, would they take her? Or would she just drag Al-Hamad into a legal mess? She felt cornered, small, helpless. Then her phone buzzed again. A different notification. This one was from YouTube. She didn't have a YouTube channel. She hardly used the app. Confused, she opened it. The notification was a recommendation. A video that was trending now in New York. The thumbnail was blurry, a cell phone video taken in a dimly lit restaurant. But the title was clear as day. Billionaire gets owned by Waitress in Arabic full fight. Sarah's heart stopped. She clicked the video. It had been uploaded 6 hours ago. Views 1.2 million. She pressed play. The camera angle was from the table right next to table 4. It was shaky at first, obscured by a wine glass, but the audio was crystal clear. She heard Cross's voice. Look at this creature. Trash. Goat. Then she heard her own voice. Clear, strong, fluent. The video captured everything. The insults, the translation, the look on Cross's face when she answered back. The applause from the nearby tables that she hadn't even registered in her shock. She scrolled down to the comments. User 77. Dude, that Waitress is a legend. Who is she? NYC Foodie. I know that guy. That's Damian Cross. He's a total scumbag. Finally, someone stood up to him. Arabic speaker, 99. Her Arabic is better than his English, LOL. She destroyed him with class. Sarah read the comments, her breath catching in her throat. She wasn't invisible anymore. The world had seen what happened. But as she refreshed the page, the view count ticked up. 1.3 million. Then her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered it, her hand shaking. Hello. Is this Sarah Bennett? A woman's voice. Sharp, fast, professional. Yes. This is Julia Vance from the New York Times. We saw the video. We'd like to hear your side of the story. Damian Cross just released a statement saying you were drunk and belligerent. We want to know the truth. Sarah froze. Cross was already spinning the narrative. He was lying to the press. If she stayed silent, his billions would buy the truth. He would crush her with lawsuits and lies. But she looked at the video again. She looked at the comments. Thousands of strangers cheering for her. "Ms. Bennett," the reporter asked, "are you there?" Sarah stood up. She looked at her reflection in the mirror of her tiny apartment. She wasn't the ghost in the waistcoat anymore. "I'm here," Sarah said, her voice steadying. "And I'll tell you everything." The rain had stopped, leaving New York City slick with grey puddles and reflected neon. Sarah sat in the back booth of the Midnight Diner, a 24-hour greasy spoon 3 blocks from her apartment. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of cheap, lukewarm coffee, trying to leach some warmth into her fingers. Across from her sat Julia Rivera, the reporter from the New York Times. Julia was nothing like the frantic voice on the phone. In person, she was calm, methodical, and possessed eyes that seemed to catalogue every micro-expression Sarah made. A digital recorder sat between them, its tiny red light blinking like a heartbeat. "So," Julia said, leaning back against the cracked red vinyl of the booth. "Let's go over the timeline again. You serve the wine. He insults the wine. Then he switches to Arabic. Why do you think he did that? Why not just insult you in English?" Sarah stared at the steam rising from her cup. "Power," she said softly. It wasn't enough to be rude. He wanted to share a secret joke with Mr. Al-Hamad. He wanted to bond with another powerful man over the degradation of a servant. Using Arabic was a way to exclude me, to turn me into an object in the room, a piece of furniture that couldn't talk back. He thought he was safe. "And when you responded?" Julia asked, scribbling in a notebook. "I didn't plan it," Sarah admitted. "My father, he died 2 years ago. Lung cancer. We spent his last years in debt fighting insurance companies. But before that, he was a diplomat. He taught me that language is a bridge. When Cross used it as a weapon, it felt like he was desecrating something my father loved. I couldn't hold it in." Julia nodded slowly. "And the lawsuit, $5 million. "It's a scare tactic," Sarah said, though her voice wavered. "He knows I don't have $5 million. He knows I don't have $500. He wants to crush me, so I sign an NDA and disappear." "Are you going to—" Sarah looked out the window at the passing traffic. "I don't know." The article ran the next morning. The scholar who served the billionaire, how one waitress exposed the brusque brutality of Wall Street's golden boy. It was sympathetic. It highlighted Sarah's academic background, her financial struggles, and the sheer bullying nature of Damien Cross. It went viral instantly. The waitress hero narrative was catnip for a public tired of arrogant elites. But Damien Cross didn't get to be a billionaire by rolling over. 12 hours after the article was published, Cross appeared on a prime-time financial news program. He looked rested calm and regrettably handsome in a charcoal suit. He didn't look like a bully. He looked like a captain of industry. Sarah watched the interview from her laptop, sitting on her bed, her stomach twisting into knots. "Damien," the host asked, "the video looks bad. You used some harsh language." Cross chuckled a smooth, practiced sound. "Tom, look, it was a private dinner. I was stressed. The deal was worth billions jobs for Americans' infrastructure for the city. I was venting. Was it polite? No. Do I apologize for being rude? Sure. But let's look at the facts." Cross leaned into the camera, his eyes cold and direct. "This woman, Miss Bennett, she's a failed academic with a history of financial instability. We have witness testimony from the restaurant manager that she was drinking on the job. She was belligerent. She provoked the situation to get a reaction, and luckily for her, someone was filming. "It's a setup, Tom. She's looking for a payout. It's a classic shakedown." Sarah gasped. "Liar!" She screamed at the screen. "You liar!" But the damage was instantaneous. The narrative shifted. The internet, previously united behind her, began to fracture. Comment 44. "Wait, she was drinking. That explains why she snapped." Realist 88. "Of course she wants money. Who waits tables with a PhD unless they messed up somewhere?" Crossfan, "She baited him. She knew who he was." Then came the doxing. Someone Sarah suspected, a firm hired by Cross, leaked her credit report online. Her student loan debt, her late payments on her father's medical bills, her credit card balance. It was all plastered on forums. Strangers began analyzing her spending habits, judging her for buying coffee while owing money to hospitals. Her phone began to ring incessantly with threats. "Watch your back, gold digger. We know where you live." By Friday evening, Sarah had unplugged her router and turned off her phone. She sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city, feeling completely exposed. The Waitress hero was gone. Now she was just the grifter waitress. She had told the truth, and the truth was being buried under an avalanche of money. A knock at the door made her jump. She grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from her shelf, the only weapon she had, and crept toward the hallway. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Ms. Bennett." A woman's voice, firm, authoritative, but not aggressive. "My name is Eleanor Sterling. I was sent by Mr. Al-Hamad." Sarah peered through the peephole. Standing in the hallway was a woman in her 60s, wearing a trench coat that cost more than Sarah's apartment building. She had silver hair cut in a sharp bob and held a leather briefcase. Sarah opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "Mr. Al-Hamad. He cannot be seen communicating with you directly," Eleanor said. "It would compromise the legal proceedings. But he is a man of his word. He told you to watch your back. He sent me to help you watch it." "I can't afford a lawyer," Sarah said. "Especially not one who looks like you." Eleanor smiled, a sharp, shark-like expression that was surprisingly comforting. "My fees are covered. And frankly, Ms. Bennett, I've been waiting for a chance to go after Damien Cross for a decade. He cheated a client of mine on a zoning deal in 2015. I don't like him. Open the door." Sarah undid the chain. Eleanor walked in, surveyed the tiny, cluttered apartment, and set her briefcase on the kitchen table. "Pack a bag," Eleanor said. "What?" "You can't stay here. Your address is on the dark web. I have a car waiting. We're going to a secure hotel." "Is it that bad?" Sarah asked, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. Eleanor pulled a file from her briefcase. "Cross has hired Blackstone Strategies to handle his PR. They don't just spin stories. They break people. They will have investigators digging through your trash by morning. We need to go on the offensive. Now." Sarah looked around her apartment. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And now, because she had defended her dignity for 60 seconds, she was being chased out of it. "Okay," Sarah whispered. "I'm ready." The suite at the St. Regis was larger than Sarah's entire apartment. It was quiet, luxurious, and felt like a fortress. This was the hotel Al-Hamad had mentioned, and true to his word, the staff treated her with a deferential kindness that made her want to weep. For 3 days, the suite became a war room. Eleanor Sterling was a force of nature. She worked 18 hours a day, her phone glued to her ear, barking orders to paralegals and investigators. "He's suing for defamation." Eleanor laughed as she paced the thick carpet, holding a glass of scotch. "Let him. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. The problem isn't the truth, Sarah. The problem is proof." Sarah sat on the velvet sofa surrounded by stacks of paper. "We have the video." "The video shows the reaction," Eleanor countered. "It doesn't clearly pick up what he said before you switch to Arabic. The audio is muddy. Cross's lawyers are claiming he said, 'This features class,' and you misheard it as, 'This creature is trash.' They have an audio expert willing to testify to that ambiguity." "That's insane," Sarah said, slamming a file shut. "He called me a goat. He told me to crawl." "I believe you," Eleanor said, sitting down. "But the court needs clear evidence. We need the security footage from the Gilded Onyx. They have high-definition cameras in the dining room." "I asked Galloway for it," Sarah said. "Or I didn't get the chance. He fired me." "We subpoenaed it yesterday," Eleanor said, her face grim. "They replied this morning. Apparently the camera system malfunctioned during the dinner service. The footage doesn't exist." Sarah put her head in her hands. "Galloway. He deleted it. He's terrified of Cross." "Of course he did," Eleanor sighed. "Without that tape, it's his word against yours. And his word is backed by $1 billion and a reputation as a job creator. You're just the disgruntled employee with a drinking problem, a lie we have to disprove, by the way." The hopelessness washed over Sarah again. "Maybe I should just settle. If I apologize, maybe they'll drop the debt." "If you apologize," Eleanor said sharply, "you admit to lying. They will destroy your future. You will never work in any field that requires trust. You will be branded a liar forever. Do not give him that satisfaction." Sarah stood up and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to her struggle. "So what do we do?" "We find a witness," Eleanor said. There were 3 people at that table, Cross Al-Hamad and the assistant. "Al-Hamad won't testify," Sarah said. "He's a foreign national. He avoids American courts. He's helping me financially, but he won't get on the stand." "That leaves the assistant," Eleanor said. "The young guy. Do you remember him?" Sarah closed her eyes, thinking back to the night. Tariq. He looked uncomfortable. He tried to stop Cross. He whispered, "This is inappropriate." "Tariq Al-Fayed," Eleanor said, checking her notes. "He's Al-Hamad's nephew, actually. Interning. He's still in the city. But getting him to flip on a business partner, it's risky." Before they could strategize further, Sarah's laptop pinged. She had created a new encrypted email address on Eleanor's instructions. Only Eleanor and Al-Hamad knew it. There was a new message. Subject: truth from anonymous. Sarah froze. "Eleanor." Eleanor came over immediately. "Open it." Sarah clicked the email. There was no text in the body, just an attachment, a voice memo file. She clicked play. The sound was crystal clear, much clearer than the YouTube video. It wasn't recorded from a distance. It was recorded from right at the table. Cross's voice, Arabic. "Look at this creature. She stands there like a statue. Zero intelligence. In my country, these people are trash." Assistant's voice, Arabic. "Sir, this is inappropriate." Cross's voice, Arabic, quiet. "She understands nothing. Look at her. The lights are on, but nobody is home. She is a peasant." Then the sound of glass being placed on the table, and Sarah's voice responding in Arabic. The recording continued. It captured the aftermath. It captured Cross screaming at Galloway after Al-Hamad left. Cross's voice, English. "I don't care what you have to do. Arthur, delete the tapes. Get rid of her, ruin her. If anyone asks, she was drunk. Make it up." The recording ended. Sarah stared at the screen, tears pricking her eyes. He recorded it. Tariq recorded the meeting, probably to take notes for the business deal. "He didn't just record the insults," Eleanor said, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "He recorded the conspiracy. If anyone asks, she was drunk. Make it up." That's not just defamation, Sarah. That's obstruction of justice. That's fraud. Why did he send it? Sarah asked. Why now? Because, Eleanor said, closing the laptop with a snap. Some people still have a conscience, and because Al-Hamad probably told him to. Eleanor pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Her voice changed. It became the voice of a general ordering an airstrike. Get the partners on the line and call the district attorney's office. We're not just filing a defense. We're filing a countersuit, and I want Cross deposed by Monday morning. She looked at Sarah. Get some sleep, kid. Tomorrow we burn his castle down. The deposition was scheduled for 3 days later at the offices of Sterling Cooper, and Cross no relation to Damien, thankfully. The atmosphere in the conference room was toxic. Damien Cross sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He looked bored. He checked his watch constantly. His team of 5 lawyers in shark-skin suits surrounded him. Sarah sat opposite him, flanked only by Eleanor. Let's get this over with, Cross said, not even looking at Sarah. I have a lunch reservation at Per Se. This won't take long, Mr. Cross, Eleanor said, opening her laptop. We are prepared to offer a settlement, Cross's lead attorney interrupted. $20,000, no admission of guilt. She signs the NDA, deletes her social media, and issues a public apology. No, Eleanor said. Cross laughed. You're in no position to negotiate. We're going to bury you in motions until your funding runs dry. We're not negotiating, Eleanor said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive. She slid it across the polished table. It spun and stopped directly in front of Damien Cross. What is this? Cross asked, looking at it like it was a bug. That, Eleanor said, is a recording from the phone of Tariq Al-Fayed. It captures the entire conversation, including your instruction to Mr. Galloway to fabricate the drunk waitress story and destroy the security footage. The room went deathly silent. Cross's lead attorney snatched the USB drive. His face went pale. We also have a sworn affidavit from Arthur Galloway, Eleanor continued. We served him yesterday. When he heard we had the audio, he flipped. He didn't want to go to jail for perjury to protect you, Damien. He admitted everything. The deleted footage, the instructions to lie to the press, the blacklisting. Damien Cross finally looked at Sarah. For the first time, there was genuine fear in his eyes. The arrogance was gone. The boredom was gone. He looked like a trapped animal. You can't use that, Cross stammered. That was a private conversation. 2-party consent laws. Actually, Eleanor smiled. New York is a 1-party consent state. And since Tariq was a party to the conversation, and he consented to recording, it's fully admissible. Eleanor leaned forward. Here is our settlement offer, Mr. Cross. You will drop your lawsuit immediately. You will issue a public video apology to Sarah, admitting you lied. You will pay her lost wages, and you will pay for emotional distress. We are asking for $10 million. $10 million, Cross screamed, standing up. You're out of your mind. If you don't, Eleanor said calmly, we release this audio to the press today, and then we send it to the district attorney. You'll be charged with witness tampering and obstruction. You'll go to prison, Damien, and your stock price, it will hit 0 before you can say, peasant. Cross looked at his lawyers. They weren't looking at him. They were looking at their papers, realizing there was no way out. Cross looked at Sarah. He looked for the fear he was used to seeing in people's eyes. He looked for the submission. But Sarah just looked back. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She was just watching him, steady and unafraid. Choose Damien, Sarah said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of the entire room. Cross slumped back into his chair. He loosened his tie. He looked suddenly old. Draw up the papers, he whispered to his lawyer. The ink on the settlement papers was still wet when Sarah walked out of the mahogany-panelled conference room. The hallway was lined with portraits of the kind of men who built the world Damien Cross thought he owned. But today, one of those men had been brought to his knees by a woman who knew how to serve water and conjugate verbs. Eleanor Sterling walked beside her, the sharp click of her heels echoing like a victory march. She handed Sarah a sleek black envelope. "The check is wired," Eleanor said, her voice losing its aggressive courtroom edge. $10 million. It will hit your account within the hour. The apology video goes live at noon. We retained approval rights on the final cut. It's satisfying. Sarah took the envelope, but she didn't open it. She felt a strange numbness. For the last week, she had been running on pure adrenaline and survival instinct. Now the engine had cut out, and she was floating. "It's over?" Sarah asked. "It's over," Eleanor confirmed, pressing the elevator button. "You didn't just beat him, Sarah. You dismantled him. Apex Horizon stock is already plummeting. When the apology drops, the board is going to have a very serious conversation about his future. You might have just ended his career." Sarah leaned against the mirrored wall. She didn't look like a millionaire. She looked tired, her hair in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. She didn't look like a conqueror. She looked like a survivor. "I didn't want to end his career," she whispered. "I just wanted him to treat me like a person." The apology video dropped exactly at 12 p.m. Sarah sat in the lobby of the St. Regis, watching on her phone. On the screen, Damien Cross sat against a grey background. He looked diminished, like a balloon that had lost its air. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of public humiliation. "My name is Damien Cross," he read from a teleprompter, swallowing hard. "Last week I behaved in a manner that was disgraceful. I targeted Ms. Sarah Bennett with insults, assuming she could not understand me. I was wrong. She displayed a grace I lacked. I also admit to fabricating lies about her conduct to protect my reputation. To Ms. Bennett, I apologize." The video ended. The internet reaction was instantaneous. The grifter waitress narrative evaporated, replaced by a flood of support. But as the view count climbed into the millions, Sarah realized she didn't care about the internet's validation. She stood up and walked out of the hotel. She walked 40 blocks to a dusty bookstore in the East Village. She found the copy of al-Mutanabbi's poems, the book she had quoted to Cross. She bought it for $14, paying with a debit card now linked to $10 million. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in a sun-drenched loft overlooking the Hudson River. It was a construction site filled with dust and the sound of hammers. "It's a lot of space," the real estate agent said nervously. "Are you sure you want the whole floor for a language school?" "Not just a language school," Sarah said, touching the exposed brick. "A cultural center, a place where service workers, waiters, drivers, cleaners can learn languages for free. I want to give them the tools to defend themselves, to be heard." "That's noble," the agent said. "But the funding, I have a benefactor," Sarah smiled. "A very wealthy man who made a very large involuntary donation." Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Al-Hamad. "Mr. Al-Hamad? I saw the news about the Bennett Center. A fine name. I have wired an additional contribution. Consider it an investment in the dignity of New York. You were never a ghost, Sarah. You were just waiting to be seen." Sarah smiled, pocketing the phone. She turned to the construction foreman, a burly man covered in drywall dust. "Excuse me," she called out. He turned. "Yeah, lady. What do you need?" "Are you all thirsty?" Sarah asked. I'm going to grab coffee for the crew. My treat." "You don't have to do that, Mom," he said, surprised. "You're the owner." "I know," Sarah said, stepping into the bright sunlight of her new life. "But I'm also a waitress, and the service here is going to be impeccable." Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that dignity is not a commodity. It cannot be bought by billionaires, and it cannot be taken away by bullies. In a world that often ignores the people who serve us, Sarah proved that intelligence and worth are not defined by a uniform. She showed us that the most powerful weapon against cruelty isn't violence. It's the truth. Damien Cross thought he was speaking a secret language of power, but he learned the hard way that when you underestimate the invisible people, you risk being exposed by them. If Sarah's victory gave you chills, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Have you ever stood up to a bully or wish you had? Tell me your story in the comments below. And for more stories of justice served, cold subscribe and ring that bell. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the quiet ones.